Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Meet the Managers. Today, we will be talking about everything healthcare related, and we're going to have a focus on medtech and health tech. I have two wonderful speakers today, Jessica Kamada and Eric Heinz. And my name is Niels de Jonge, the Community Engagement Associate at VC Lab. I help run a lot of these events, and a bit more about the company. VC Lab offers a 14-week program that helps talented and motivated venture capitalists to launch ethical venture capital firms that will make a positive change to the world. At the moment, we're taking applications for cohort 16. Cohort 15 started, and now you have an opportunity to join cohort 16. It's usually a good idea to apply early because that gives you a much better chance of being selected for a variety of reasons. These events, we do them on a weekly basis, oftentimes 2 or 3 a week. And if you want to stay up to date with all of the events we're doing, I highly recommend checking out our events page, which I just posted in the chat. Here you can register to any of the events that are coming up. Everyone in attendance is more than welcome to join these. Next week, we have a very special session we always like to highlight. On July 9th, we have our Venture Trends event. This is usually one of our most popular sessions as we go over the trends for the next quarter, which are decided by you, the public. You can vote on venture trends, and then we have a highly interactive sessions on AirMeet as well, where you can join virtual tables to discuss those topics with members of our team, with Adeo, and so on. If you're interested in attending this event, I will put the link in the chat. We hope to see you there. Now, before we formally start, just a tiny bit of background on an event like this. They're always highly interactive. So this is a panel discussion. I will ask the panel some questions, but you also have the opportunity to ask them. To do so, you can see a Q&A button next to the chat. It's like top right of the screen. Place your questions in there and upvote your favorite ones. Other than that, these events, yeah, they're highly interactive, which means you can introduce yourself in the chat, post your LinkedIn, just avoid anything that's overly promotional or can be considered general solicitation, as those messages will be deleted. A common question we have is, are these events recorded? Will I get a recording? The answer is yes. We have a YouTube channel where all events are posted. You can find it once again in the chat. And also, after attending this event, we will send an email with the recording. Okay, with that out of the way, the only thing I have to do in terms of formalities is read the following disclaimer. The content presented today is not directed to any investors or potential investors and does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. And with that out of the way, we can formally start, and it's my honor to introduce our panel for today, consisting of Jessica Kamada and Eric Heinz. Jessica, feel free to introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess. I'm the managing partner of Swizzle Ventures, and I'm based in Seattle. I'm sure we're going to get a little bit deeper into it as we go along, but I'll just leave that there for now.
Thank you, Jessica. Eric?
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Heinz. I'm managing partner of Heinz Ventures, which is a medtech-focused venture fund. I'm currently based in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Now, how did you both get started in this field? Like, what was your road from, like, I don't know, previous profession to being fund manager at the moment? Jessica?
Yeah, love to share more. I actually do not have a background in healthcare, so I'm coming to this sector actually with a background in growth and working with technology companies for a very long time prior to launching my firm. I built another business, which was a growth marketing agency, and we worked with a lot of early stage tech companies that were consumer focused, that were mobile based, and really helped companies that were trying to learn how to use this new mobile technology to serve huge swaths of people. We worked with companies like Uber and DoorDash at the very beginning, and then this new interesting wellness, health tech, using mobile devices to serve people in healthcare and from a wellness perspective started to emerge. For example, we worked with companies like Headspace, Care of, which was a vitamin company, and one of the first telemedicine companies, Lemonade Health, and I'm starting to understand how those could grow into large venture scale
Mhm.
companies. Um, Through my own personal experiences, I also saw just the very huge gaps that exist in healthcare today for women specifically,
Mhm.
with a very low standard of care. And just a portion of the story of how I got started and why I'm doing what I'm doing. But really, one of the missions of Swizzle Ventures is to close the gap in healthcare for women,
Yeah.
both from a data side and a technology side. And so after seeing that huge gap and opportunity in the market, matching that with my expertise and growth, we decided to focus on healthcare as a firm.
Okay, that's very interesting. I do want to double click on that for a moment. So, is there like an increasing awareness that in this field, like I've heard things like a lot of like medical papers, they're focusing like so much on men that yeah, for clinical testing, for anything that women are disregarded in that a lot. Is that something the industry is waking up to, and is there an increasing awareness of that problem?
I think there is an increasing awareness, and historically, the reasons that there was not was that men have always been in positions of power when it comes to the healthcare systems and how decisions are made. And it's a lot easier to build innovations for things that you yourself are feeling pain in. And that's where a lot of the innovations were coming from. Also, there has been historically a huge lack of medical research around women. It was only in 1993 that it was mandated that women must be included in clinical trials. So
Hmm.
now, 30 years later, finally we have some data that says, oh, women are not small men
Right.
clinically and biologically, right? And so I think that coupled with the realization that there's a huge economic opportunity here to
Mhm.
figure out how they're different. Um, Money is power, and if there's money to be had in a sector, I think people will wake up to it. And that has
Right.
happened over the last 5 years. VC investment in femtech or women focused healthcare has increased 350%. Um, but it started from a small number, right? So it's still a very small portion of the overall healthcare pie. I think 2%.
Right. Well, you just mentioned like it's what 51% of the population is female, so there is a lot of opportunity there. Okay. Eric, why don't you share some of your origin story?
Sure. Thank you, Nils. So my origin story really starts in the fifth grade when I had surgery for the first time. And I
Mhm.
was exposed to things like CT scanners and anesthesia and implants. And it just really sparked my curiosity as a young person. My father was an electrical engineer. And so we always used to tinker and take things apart when I was young. And I thought that biomedical engineering is a career path where I could really make an impact. And I was just very much curious about it. So I was fortunate to have been able to start my career at Medtronic. I was a product development engineer there, so learned what it takes to be able to develop high quality medical devices from concept all the way to commercialization. I then moved out to the Valley and worked at Intuitive Surgical as product manager, where I really honed my experience with understanding how to develop a strong product market fit. Then I ended up having an opportunity to join a intraoperative imaging company called IMRIS, which was a turnaround situation. So being able to go through that turnaround experience was a great learning experience. And it was one of those where I actually saw firsthand the impact of decisions that were made at the pre-seed stage of a company and how those decisions could have ramifications when you're at this point of going through FDA or trying to build a market. After that, I started my consulting business. So I had some experience as an investment banker, also a management consultant. I was actually brought into one of the largest FDA remediation projects in the history of medical devices. And so that was fascinating to get experience looking at the quality regulations and what can go wrong when things aren't compliant. I was then recruited to Smith & Nephew to lead corporate strategy, and eventually then that became a role leading corporate development where I led several M&A deals. And then most recently, my last executive role was with Titan Medical, which was a publicly traded medical robotics company. Okay. So all these experiences built up upon each other to get to the point where last year, I was able to reflect upon my experience and my education and my passion. And I took an inventory of the assets that I've built up. And they really pointed clearly to going into venture capital as an area where I can make a big impact in the world.
So you're mostly investing in pre-seed companies as far as I'm aware. Is that because you feel like that's also where you can make a larger impact as a fund manager?
That's correct. Given my operational experience and a lot of experience working in product development projects and doing upstream marketing work, I feel that I could be a partner to those technical founders that may not have experience in areas like intellectual property or marketing or M&A. And by being an active board member, we'll be able to develop a partnership so that they avoid making those decisions that could cause the company to fall into the chasm, and provide that context of decision making in which we can grow and ultimately become a high quality acquisition target for the large strategics out there.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. So you're both clearly very excited about these fields. How do you convey that to LPs? Like, how do you distill the core message? This is why this is an important field and why you should invest and why you can make money here. Jessica, do you want to take a crack at this?
Yeah, I think for our LPs, it's a why now and why is this important? And from a economic perspective, again, the research and also this combination of AI actually enabling more innovations in this field for women, specifically personalized care plans and dealing with that pesky variable we like to call hormones. It actually is enabling innovations in the space, and the economic opportunity is $1 trillion globally by 2030, which actually in some reports I've seen moved up to 2026. I think it's 330 billion in the US alone. So just looking at that and looking at the blue sky opportunity for women, I mean, the standard of care is so painfully like subpar for so many women that I just think even a small step up will have immense ramifications for women and also be able to garner huge returns.
Thank you. Same question for you, Eric.
Well, so there are a lot of problems that still need to be solved in the med tech world. And one of the things that I talk to LPs about is that you could search databases that are out there that are tied to adverse events in the field. And you could do some searches where the results end up maxing out the number of records that could be returned in a search. And I personally think that that's absolutely terrible that we allow such issues to persist. instead of finding the root cause of those problems and coming up with great solutions. And that's where the founders really need groups like what we're doing to provide both that pre-seed capital, but also the operational expertise to help guide them and make sure that they're successful in their growth. So there's a big vacuum in that area right now, especially in pre-seed medtech. Now, on the other side, looking at M&A, corporate strategics have plenty of cash to deploy that's sitting on the balance sheet. But my experience in working in M&A has been that the deal quality has not been as high as I would have expected it to be. Deals that we thought would be great ended up having issues come up in due diligence that killed the deals. And even the deals that we did do, they ended up not meeting the value creation objectives that we had. So that's where I think that there's an opportunity to do something different.
As a fund manager, how do you identify those issues? Like, what is like a typical due diligence process for you when evaluating an opportunity?
I can go first. We are looking at, I would say our sweet spot is seed, and we'll do a bit of pre-seed as well. So we can focus on the seed stage because I think the investment criteria is different for sure. Given my operational background, one of the key things that I look for are markers that say this is a high growth potential company. And so I'm looking for velocity in some foundational growth metrics. If they don't have revenue yet, I mean, hopefully at seed they do. But at pre-seed, if they don't have revenue yet, I'm looking for organic traction of some sort. I'm looking for early engagement metrics. I'm looking for, something that says this is of value to the buyer, whether that's the patient or the, hospital, the payer or provider or whatever it is. And so I'm looking for growth rates typically of these specific metrics. And we also like to invest in companies that are going to be with the patient for a long period of time. So we don't typically invest in point solutions because we like high LTV to CAC ratio companies typically. We have a very strong point of view around supporting women from a healthcare perspective throughout all different stages in their life cycle. So we call them pivotal life stages. So if we can invest in companies that are supporting women throughout multiple, then that's where we'll go. Just from a kind of, we see that if you can grow revenue over time, then that's a really good marker. We also like to invest in founders that I like to say that they've felt pain during whatever problem that they're trying to solve or whatever pivotal life stage that they're building in. I think it gives you just a different sense of motivation and understanding of the problem set, and that shapes the solution that you're trying to solve. It also lets us understand kind of the grit level and the pain tolerance that founders have when building a company that we know is probably going to take them 8 to 10 years to exit from. And so we want to know that they have it in them for the long term.
All right. I guess for both of you, Eric, for you as well, if you're investing in pre-seed stage companies, you need to play the long game, right? And again, in terms of due diligence, how do you vet those very early companies, Eric?
So I start out with looking at the clinical need and making sure that it's an unmet clinical need that is currently causing pain points to the patient, the provider, or the healthcare institution or the payers. And so that's where it starts. The other thing is looking at the market and the market dynamics. Who are the competitors? What are the alternative treatment options for that disease state? What's the clinical track record of the standard of care? And see if there are opportunities to be able to create disruption because there's weaknesses in the current standard of care. I then like to do a due diligence in understanding the intellectual property that's created the
Mhm.
foundation for the company. Where has it come from? Is it in licensed from a university? Have the founders developed it from in-house? And what's that IP strategy look like? Because I'd much rather build a company upon which we could build a large patent portfolio around an area instead of just focusing on one asset.
Right. Another thing I was wondering about, so you're investing mostly in, yeah, medical devices and so on. Do you do any validation on like, okay, does this actually work? Like, are there instances where there's like a prototype you can personally test? I'm thinking of health issues that can affect like a lot of people. Like I've seen like headbands for sleep aid and things like that. Is that a thing that comes into play sometimes? Or
Well, being an engineer and working on things from a napkin sketch and building them from nothing, I'm very much comfortable in getting into that early stage where it's still a concept and you don't yet have a prototype. And
right,
what I actually prefer is being in that stage because, to tell you the truth, a lot of brilliant technical founders come up with great technologies, but they often neglect the product management element about who are you building this product for and what are
right.
their needs and what are their barriers to be able to adopt that product ultimately when it reaches the commercial markets. And so that's what I see. But certainly, if they've got preclinical data, especially with things like biopharma opportunities, understanding the science behind what got them to where they are today, that's very helpful. Understanding usability studies that they may have performed or animal models that have been performed, that's very helpful to understand the technical feasibility in where they're at with the company from a development perspective. But I'm open to things that are not yet at that stage.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, the role of a fund manager also involves helping your portfolio companies, right? And especially if you're doing an early stage approach, that is where, um, yeah, you will be expected to do a lot of that. What is like the greatest value add that you feel you can give to your portfolio companies as a fund manager?
My greatest value add is the network that I can bring to the table. So it starts with looking at great advisors, great board members, employees, and then also your partners in the ecosystem. So it could be regulatory consultants, it could be operations experts, and then ultimately it's the relationships that I've formed over many years with the buyer universe. And
Right.
those are relationships that have been built up over many years that will bring value to the companies that I invest in.
Yep. I'll echo part of that. I think for us, it depends what business model the company has. So as I mentioned, I'm coming from an operator point of view and in growth and growing technology companies. Many of the companies that we invest in is what I'll call like patient first health tech. So the company needs to be benefiting the end user as the patient, and that may not always be the buyer, but it needs to be the beneficiary. So for consumer companies, especially where the founders are in healthcare or they're clinicians, like they really understand that piece of it. I can come in and help on the strategic side, actually connecting them to the right growth people to make sure that they get the revenue velocity they need to be a legitimate tech company versus, just something that can exist in healthcare or, not get the venture scale returns that they would need. So that's one piece. And then because I'm not coming from traditional healthcare, I've surrounded myself and the fund with people who are. So on our team, we also have healthcare commercialization experts that not only help to vet these deals on the healthcare side, but who can actually make the connections to the Optums of the world, the United Healthcares of the world, like for payer partnerships. I think even if you do start in B2C, or many health tech companies that are starting B2C, eventually to get the scale they need to be considering larger payer or provider partnerships, and we can help at least make some of those introductions. And my partner also is a healthcare operator or former healthcare operator, so she kind of understands how how the buyers are thinking and how these companies can navigate themselves into those larger enterprise conversations. Um, I think just understanding how to get your foot in the door and
And
navigating these huge orgs is super important and something that we counsel our portfolio companies on.
no, thank you. I think from both of your answers, it seems very clear that like surrounding yourself with the right people and then knowing who to refer others to is like one of the vital things you can do here. But maybe more so in this field than in some other sectors. But how how do you start like building like that team around you? Like, what are some best practices?
For me, I knew that being a solo GP, breaking into healthcare without a traditional healthcare background was going to be interesting, and that it's important to me that I know the sector really, really well. And
Mhm.
so my first thing was trying to find a venture partner who could actually work inside the firm with me making these decisions. Um, and then from there, building a highly strategic LP base, um, filled with traditional healthcare executives that really understood the ins and outs of healthcare and also recognized these huge gaps and could validate the huge gaps in practice of women's health and how far we have to go. Um, and then also founders of other health tech companies, um, execs that of health tech companies that have been acquired and have kind of been through these different stages in um, the startup journey, so that not only they can be potentially a resources for our portfolio companies, but so they can be a resource for me as well.
Thank you,
Hmm.
Eric. How do you start building a team?
Well, one of the things that's great about working in many multinational corporations is that you get to you work and identify the A players in those organizations who oftentimes are going off to do bigger and better things. And so with those relationships, you develop trust. You understand their character, capacity, energy, and experience to be able to come and create value with the portfolio companies or as a venture partner with the venture fund. So I've been very much intentional about building relationships up with people that I thought have been just brilliant people that I want to be part of my team. And so looking forward to being able to build teams starting out with a network. The other thing is mentorship. And over time, I've been fortunate to have built up a personal board of directors, of executives, board directors, and other subject matter experts that I can go to. And I've actually experienced this a lot in the lab program, where one of the key things about this is being able to reach out to your confidants and ask them for feedback on your investment thesis or your pitch deck or your strategy for approaching limited partners. And that's been extremely valuable to build those relationships and then ultimately get to the point where I'll be able to build up a board of advisors and a venture partner team.
You both went through the VC Lab Accelerator program. What would you say are the biggest takeaways you've gotten from the program, and how do you apply them today?
Do everything that Mike says.
Okay, that's
No, but seriously, I think that there's I think at the very beginning, I was in cohort 11, so I'm not sure how things have changed or evolved since I went through the program, but I just remember, at some points feeling very frustrated, um, but I stuck with it. I put my head down. I just did the program. I did what Mike said, and now I'm a on my way to be a top decile firm within the program. So I think just listening and taking your own ego out of it. And I think, like me, everyone else that is joining the program has never done this before. And so
Yes.
it was kind of like, let me just trust the experts that they know. Um, I think one of the big things that I found success with is that it's really, really important to create momentum.
Mhm.
And the only way to create momentum in fundraising, like right off the bat, is to just increase volume. Um, so I would say, when I'm really doing fundraising pushes, I'm doing 15 to 20 calls a week or 15 to
Mhm.
20 meetings a week. Um, and it was really just about like building up the pipeline so that I could get to that volume. And then things started to take off from there.
That's really great to hear. Eric, what were your biggest takeaways?
Well, about a year and a half ago, I finished my executive MBA with Kellogg, which was phenomenal to get the high level strategic perspective on things, including venture capital. But I'd say that the VC Lab experience has really given me the tactics I need to actually execute developing an institutional grade venture firm. And so being able to have both the knowledge of what is required to reach that point of institutional grade and being able to work with wonderful colleagues as part of the working groups who are going through the very same thing of going through fund formation and reaching out to LPs and developing their deal pipeline. It's just been so wonderful to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and help support others that may have a difficult week. And you could share your experiences about, how I encountered that very same thing, and this is how I handled it, and you may try this different tactic. So I thought that support network is one of the greatest things that came about with VC Lab. But the other thing is having Mike, Murto, Adeo have such great knowledge about this space where if I have any question at all, I could reach out to them on Slack and get a confident answer in what I'm trying to look at. And I don't know where else you can get such great knowledge. And also it's just the giving back and wanting to see others succeed and wanting to be
Right.
able to develop the next generation of venture capitalists that really drew me to the program.
Okay, no, thank you. Those are very kind words, and I'm happy to hear that some specifics like the working groups are really valuable to you. Let's shift gears for a moment. We've all been through like a global pandemic, and we don't often talk about it anymore. But I can imagine it has caused great shifts in the field of healthcare, medtech, and everything we're talking about today. Can either of you discuss this a bit more? Like, what are like some of the greatest shifts we've seen since?
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, so first things from a venture capital perspective, looks like investors are much more willing to make investments outside of their geographic region, which is wonderful, especially in a place like Memphis, where this is an underserved region of the country for VC. The other thing is being able to have Zoom calls and have that be it's certainly not a replacement for face-to-face meetings, but it is an important step in the whole process of developing your limited partners. From a technology perspective in medtech, a couple things that I've noticed is one, that the healthcare system is incredibly strained. We're seeing burnout like we haven't seen before. I've got personal family members that are in healthcare that are experiencing this. It's very stressful. It's you've got a lot more demands. Healthcare systems are operating in the red, which is not good at all. We know what's happening with Medicare, and so there's a number of issues in healthcare that I think we really need these startup companies to start working on the solution. So it's not just from a device perspective, but it's also how healthcare operates as well. And even the big companies, some of the areas of focus are not necessarily innovation in technology. It's innovation in operational efficiencies and how to be able to deal with the issues of talent and not having enough staff to staff operating rooms, or difficulties with getting access for patients. as an entrepreneur, I face this firsthand because I don't have the beauty of having a employer-sponsored healthcare plan. So I've had to try going through the Obamacare, and it's not great. And so I just really feel for a lot of the population that doesn't have great access to healthcare, and I think that's an area that we could also focus on improving.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective.
I'll kind of echo that. I think what Eric touched on of the huge employee burnout, and I think it uncovered a lot of inefficiencies where, hospitals were overrun due to COVID, and they were still working with a lot of these hospitals were still working with a lot of these old school systems. I mean, they're still faxing things in between departments, etc., um, which just leads to continued burnout because the admin is so terrible. So I think one of the things that COVID did was it actually like opened this door of openness on the systems to say, oh, like maybe something like AI could actually help us. I know we're going to talk about AI in a bit, but and so that I think this first wave of AI companies that we're seeing in healthcare is actually to improve the business side of healthcare
Right.
and to come in on making these admin things easier. So, and there's still a little bit of skepticism around like uh AI actually doing care or replacing care, but it's how can AI make doctors more
Right.
and clinicians like how can we enable them more? How can we make billing and insurance processes easier? How can we make charting easier? Like those types of things. Because they are seeing such a high level of burnout and shortages on the personnel side. The other thing, and this is not COVID related, but it's another mad growth trend that is hugely impacting the healthcare space is access to reproductive care for women. It
Mhm.
is causing immense care deserts for women. And let's just take a state like Minneapolis, where there is care there, but every surrounding state has limited care.
Okay.
So that makes it so that everyone is coming to to Minnesota, and the people there are not getting the care they need, or it's causing like very
Yeah.
long lines, etc. Um, so yeah, some of the innovations that I'm really excited about in this space are improving access to care, especially given these like maternal care deserts.
Mhm.
Um, and just how high how poor our maternal morbidity rate is in this country. It's the worst in any developed nation. So our lack of access to reproductive care is just going to worsen that, unfortunately, unless we do something about it.
Yeah, that's a sobering but very impactful answer. And I do believe, like what you both said, the pandemic showed where some of the cracks in the system are, access to healthcare and um, certain states being overrun. I think during the peak of the pandemic, you had doctors and nurses being flown from other states and then getting like insanely high pay rates. But then if you move a doctor from one area, that means that doctor is now not servicing yeah, the other people anyway. Let's zoom in on the AI thing a bit more. You trying to gather my thoughts here, but you mentioned that AI is promising, but at the same time, we are seeing some potential problems with AI that I'm imagining in a healthcare environment could be very detrimental, like hallucinations. If an AI confidently spouts out a wrong diagnosis, that could also cause a lot of damage. Are you worried that there will be such misapplications of AI in the near future while we are like peak hype?
My perspective on this is that it's great to be able to see this technology and think about ways and applications in which it can be used to better healthcare. Now, the beauty that we have is that we're in a highly regulated industry, and so everything needs to go through the FDA for approval before it's released in the market. And so I've got trust in that process that the people that are working on these technologies are doing so in a way that they're going to be able to ensure compliance when it comes to HIPAA and other standards for privacy, as well as making sure that we mitigate the risk of having false positives or false negatives with whatever the AI engine spits out. One area that we've seen a lot of growth with AI has been in radiology. And it's not so much that the AI is replacing the radiologist, but it's making their job more efficient because it's able to triage hundreds of scans and then be able to present to the radiologists, the ones that are the most critical, highest risk patients, where you want to get an answer to the treating physician right away. And I think that's wonderful, especially I hear that radiologists are also strapped when it comes for enough time in the day to do their work. So this is where AI can really help.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, yeah, the AI would point out, hey, maybe look there, and then a doctor can validate whether that's actually a high risk thing or not. Jessica, where do you see the biggest near-term opportunities for AI? And if you want to touch on some of the misapplications as well, also please feel free to.
Yeah, I think it needs to enable clinicians to do their best work. I think the most exciting thing that I'm excited about on the women's health side um, is that it can put together a lot of data sets to form really like personalized care plans
Mhm.
for women that we've never seen before or been able to put together. So, for example, overlaying genetic testing with your cycle, with your continuous glucose monitor, with your sleep patterns, etc. Like we should be able to form a picture of how each individual person should be, you know, living day to day and how they can improve their symptoms or take steps for like preventative medicine. Um, so often medicine has been a let me treat the symptoms that you
Yeah.
already have, or it's been, trying to cure disease. But so often, diseases that we get are fully preventable. So I'm very excited about AI being able to help like put that puzzle together. I think right now people wear all kinds of different devices to try to
Right.
figure out their own health. But no one has really been able to put that full picture together yet. And especially for women, as we go through these different stages in life, like um, what we did pre-babies to take care of ourselves is not the same thing that we do like going into menopause. And so you have to continually adapt, and there's no roadmap for that. And no one has
Mm.
given women a roadmap for that. Um, I think the other thing that I'm excited about is again being able to like pinpoint diseases before they happen. So for women specifically, uh, cardiac disease is the leading cause of death for women, and it shows up very, very differently in women than it does for men, especially from a heart attack perspective. Like, oftentimes, women will go to the emergency room thinking that they're having a heart attack and being turned away, saying that they're just tired because they're not having the same like um, what you see in the movies, like gripping chest,
Yeah.
cardiac arrest situation that men are having. So I think if we can use AI for better diagnostics, and enable us to live healthier lives for
Mhm.
longer. Um, that is what I'm most excited about.
That's interesting. And in an ideal world, I guess if people have better access to personal diagnostics, that may also mean that the medical system doesn't get overwhelmed by people constantly asking for blood tests or any other things that can clog up the system without there necessarily being
That's
calls.
right. And we're moving toward a point where payers are paying for those services because they know that um, preventing these diseases is a lot cheaper for them down the line. Um, I mean, we can get into the alignment of incentives in the healthcare system today, which is a huge issue. But from a payer perspective, anyways, a lot of companies in preventative health are getting traction, given uh, you know that preventing disease is a lot cheaper than treating it.
That is encouraging. Let's dive into some of the audience questions. And we have a question specifically for you, Jessica. Easy question, but someone's very curious about the story behind your firm's name.
Oh, so I'm also a Midwesterner like Eric. I grew up in Michigan and a swizzle. So I grew up figure skating actually. I was a competitive figure skater for 10 years growing up. And a
Oh, wow.
swizzle is a foundational skating move made up of pivots on the ice. And it kind of goes with our through line. Um, I know we're not really supposed to talk about our fun thesis on this, but a part of it is kind of empowering women through pivotal life stages. So it's a little deep cut branding play there.
Oh, that's interesting. You're incorporating some of your personal story into that. Uh, okay. Question for both of you. How does assessing the theoretical viability of a business model in your industry differ from the methodologies that others apply to assessing pre-revenue models in more conventional sectors such as manufacturing?
Thanks for putting it up on the screen. I was like,
Yeah,
that's a
Oh,
good
it's a
question.
handful, so I figured I might.
yeah. So one of the things I look at when building up financial models is what are the underlying assumptions. There are certain constraints and knowns that with experience you could end up incorporating in these models. For instance, how many accounts can one rep cover? And what's the typical number of surgeons in total that hospital will actually be able to capture and generate revenue from? So you could do a kind of a bottoms up analysis by looking at those metrics and then triangulating them with the top down approach to see, is this feasible? Is it realistic? And of course, the other thing that you do with modeling is do sensitivities and scenarios. So we do risk adjustment to be able to see what's the case going to look like if we don't hit that adoption rate that we're expecting. And so, these are all things when it comes to financial modeling. That's another element about why it's important to have people with operating experience being able to help assess these financial models and be able to see those areas where that just doesn't sound right, because I've seen what the expense is for surgeon training, for instance, or R&D, and but it's a good question.
I would say that it's really looking at the business model and understand the different margin profiles in health tech firms. So a tech-enabled services business is going to be a different margin profile than a device, is going to be a different margin profile than a SaaS company. So for me, when I'm thinking about venture scale, I'm looking at margin profile, growth velocity, and how fast are they going to get to my number that I know will return my fund. Um, and so it's really just about, if you just pare it back, like no matter what sector they're in, really understanding those key benchmarks on the business model. And then if you apply the layer of the sector on top of it, I think in healthcare, especially if it's a B2B model, you have to factor in the time it takes to uh, get a payer partnership done. And it's typically 12 months or so. So it's like, all right, how do I factor that into the timeline of this velocity that they need to grow to get to an exit point? When we're talking about venture and actually assessing, like, can I as a fiduciary invest in this company?
Right, and we have a question that's somewhat adjacent to this. Someone's asking, given the challenging environment for healthcare investments in the past few years, how do you convince LPs that you'll be able to generate outsized VC level returns?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
One of the things is selection of the deals that you get into in the first place. So being able to identify those opportunities that are going to be the winners and articulating that thesis about why to your LP committee or your investment committee. I think that's probably the key first step in making sure that you're able to pick the winners that are going to outperform in the market.
Yep. And for me, I agree that it is picking ability. And also, because we are coming from an operator lens and not a healthcare lens, we're trying to find those health tech companies that will get the venture return. Um, and given what we know about growth velocity and how the sausage is actually made in the companies that do, um, we believe we have an edge in picking. The other thing that I haven't mentioned on this firm is that, or sorry, on this talk is that healthcare is not the only sector that we invest in,
Mhm.
and we know that our healthcare investments will likely have. But we don't know this. We think, given the historicals, but it's going to maybe take a little bit longer to
Mhm.
reach that exit point. Again, given the margin profile, given the long, deal cycles, et cetera. So we bolster our portfolio in other sectors that have much higher margin profiles and that have much higher growth velocities, for instance. And when we talk about diversifying the portfolio, many LPs like that they can invest in women's healthcare and then also in some other sectors. Um, so that's what we've seen. But we have, especially in women's health, there are a few companies um, that are pre-IPO right now that is really going to bolster the sector as a whole. I think the sector itself is new, and so there is a little bit of trepidation around, okay,
Yeah,
like, I just haven't seen this before, right? I haven't
yeah.
seen these, like, massive companies going public, and where is that? So, it's starting to happen now that the sector is, 5 and 10 years old at this point.
Yeah, a lot of this is very narrative driven, and once you have some examples you can point to of like, hey, this is what's happening in this space, and it can be successful, it becomes a much easier sell, I can imagine. We have another question for you, Jessica. Chen Xing is asking, from a non-VC background to being a solo GP and now managing partner, what advice would you give for the young generation who is wanting to penetrate the field now? And what was the most difficult obstacle you've encountered?
That's a great question. I will say, so I did skip a tiny step in my background to say that, how I started making investments in the first place, because I also don't have, like, a personal balance sheet to be this, like, epic angel investor. I think that's part of how, some people get started, but for me, like I said, we built this agency company, this services business prior, and we were working with these, like, really prolific startups or companies that ended up becoming prolific startups and having amazing exits. And over time, we started pattern matching and saying, "Oh, sorry, shoot!" Like we kind of know what good looks like, and we have this amazing network. Like we should really be investing in these companies. And so we set aside a small pot of funds on our balance sheet to start making a few investments and just start learning. Um, and from there, I realized that I really loved it. I loved early stage.
Mhm.
We were moving up market in our agency business, that we weren't really working with tiny companies anymore, and I wanted to get back there. Plus, coupled with these huge opportunities that I saw in the market, and I made the switch. But I won't lie, like there were so many people who questioned why I was doing this, that questioned my ability to do it. And at some point, I think if you don't think you can do it, you are not going to do it. So you need like such strong self belief and conviction in yourself and your thesis. Um, I think for newcomers to the space, you have to have some kind of an edge, right? That says, uh, I know what good looks like in the sector that I'm trying to penetrate. And for me, I had built that up over 15 years of operating experience. It is. For other people, that looks different. But as long as you can say, I'm qualified to do this, it doesn't mean you need an MBA. I don't have one. It doesn't mean, you need to be like, uh, a guy in a Patagonia vest, like walking around either San Francisco or New York. Like, you don't need to be that either. You just need to be yourself. And that's why people will love you and like give you money. Um, so conviction in yourself, making sure that you're actually qualified or have done things that say that you can be good at this. Um, and being different, I think, is an edge.
Okay, those are powerful words of advice. Eric, I invite you to answer the same question. Like
Yeah, well,
what
I
really
think
got
authenticity is one of the important elements. I think being able to have the edge that you provide, because you're trying to provide your LPs with unique access to deals that are going to outperform other investments that they can make when they're looking at making allocations across their portfolio. You want to be the one that can deliver on all the reasons why they're making investments in the capital asset class, which includes the impact and the ability to get insights into new technologies, new markets, create jobs, just the economic impact that this sector creates. And that's a great thing to be a part of. I'd say that for young people, there are a couple of different paths to be able to enter into the industry. Of course, you could start out as an analyst with a VC fund. VC is one of those industries where having relationships and connections to be able to access those opportunities is important. So being able to be diligent about building a network, working with your university professors to ask for connections to people in the industry, volunteering on boards. One of the greatest things that I did is I served as a president for a nonprofit board about 10 years ago. And guess what? The fellow board directors that I've been working with are now interested in being LPs with me. And so it's those relationships that you develop that really help set you up for success in venture.
Thank you, Eric. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We've almost hit the top of the hour. Jessica, Eric, this was great. More than happy to invite you to speak on this topic at a future date. Thank you so much for your great answers and participation here. And the audience, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Niels. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Niels. Thank you, Jessica. It was a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.